Hello, this is Mike Swanson. This is a segment of the past American century. Was President Kennedy going to destroy the Central Intelligence Agency? If you've seen movies about President Kennedy or seen things on the internet about him, that's a common theme, that he was going to smash the CIA but was prevented from doing so by his assassination. It's not really accurate, and I'm going to get into the specifics in this video so you understand exactly what was going on. So, first of all, as in the final months of Kennedy's death, there's actually no indication, no record, or anything that suggests that he's going to destroy the Central Intelligence Agency or is planning on doing so after re-election. However, in the first couple months of his presidency, there was a move on Kennedy's attempt to actually do that, and then he didn't do it. And this was part of the fallout of the Bay of Pigs invasion, which Kennedy blamed partly on the Central Intelligence Agency and Allen Dulles in particular for giving him bad advice. He ended up firing Allen Dulles, firing Richard Bissell, and some other nefarious characters. And after the Bay of Pigs, he got his brother, Robert Kennedy, to study, what was the cause of it, who was to blame, and so forth. And there's a National Security Council meeting, which I've read a document about this happening. And Allen Dulles was in the room, Robert Kennedy was in the room, Maxwell Taylor, and President Kennedy himself. And Kennedy actually suggested getting rid of the name CIA, much to Allen Dulles' consternation. So that provides the foreground for the background that I'm about to give you that I haven't seen anyone even talk about, even though it's in a book written published in 1964 called To Move a Nation by Roger Hilsman. Hilsman worked under the Kennedy administration in the State Department as the head of the Bureau of Intelligence Research. He had a liaison role with the Central Intelligence Agency. He was very closely involved in work in Vietnam of counterinsurgency. In 1963, he became Assistant Secretary of State for Far Eastern Affairs, again actually elevating his importance with issues of Southeast Asia and Vietnam. But his book is one of the best books about the Kennedy era in foreign policy and in the Central Intelligence Agency. And I'm going to read you what he wrote about this period right after the Bay of Pigs and the Kennedy administration starting to wonder, what can we do about the CIA? So I'm reading directly from the book. It was in the Killian Committee and the White House, the discussion centered on the larger question of CIA's role in the making of policy and the conduct of foreign affairs. Within the White House staff, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. spent more time on the problem than anyone else, and it was he who developed a full and reasoned set of proposals. His basic thesis was that secret activities are permissible so long as they do not affect the principles and practices of our society, and that they cease to be permissible when their effect is to corrupt these principles and practices. The original idea of CIA had been to conceal the cloak and dagger activities behind the much larger mass of overt intelligence work, research, estimating, monitoring, foreign propaganda, broadcast, and so on. But what happened was the opposite. The covert activities had tainted all the rest, making even the most innocent of legitimate research seem sinister. Noting this and cataloging the list of other excesses, too many people overseas, too much influence of too many chiefs of state abroad, sometimes in pursuit of policies different from those of the ambassador, Schlesinger argued for a drastic overhaul of the intelligence setup. What he proposed was, 1, taking the research estimating function and all other overt activities out of CIA, and also taking the Bureau of Intelligence Research out of the State Department and combining the two into a new independent agency, and 2, leaving the CIA with its covert functions but renaming it to escape the tarnished image and putting the new agency directly under the State Department for policy guidance. So I'm stopping the quote. This is me speaking. So again, what Schlesinger was proposing was taking the real intelligence functions, the Central Intelligence Agency, out of the CIA and also similar agencies that were in the State Department, which Hilsman was head of, enrolling them into a new independent agency, and then leaving the CIA with only the covert operations and renaming it. And these proposals were being drawn up by Schlesinger at the same time that there's that meeting I spoke of you about with Kennedy and Allen Dulles talking about changing the name of the CIA. None of this stuff, of course, actually took place, and now I'm going to explain why. Again, reading from the book. In Congress and among the liberal press, there was some effort to drum up support for a fundamental reorganization of the intelligence community. The New Republic, for example, wanted to break up the CIA. The fact that was amounted to policymaking responsibility on Cuba had been followed to the CIA by President Eisenhower. Editors of the New Republic wrote, following and was the end result of a natural broad assertion of power. And to continue, at one stage, someone on the president's staff attempted to test the public view by leaking the various proposals described above to the press. A raft of stories describing especially the Schlesinger proposals appeared with a high-on-his-port dateline where the president and his staff are spending the 4th of July weekend, but by and large, the public and congressional demand for drastic measures did not extend beyond a segment decidedly on the left of the political spectrum. The lack of public and congressional support for far-reaching changes in the role and function of CIA meant that nothing could be done that required legislation. In the wake of Bay of Pigs, emotions were just too highly charged, and an attempt to get legislation would end up in a bitter fight between defenders and opponents of CIA that would hurt more than would help. Any adjustments in the role and power of CIA would have to be made within the executive branch itself, and they would have to be quiet changes even then. Of course, it was obvious that Allen Dulles and Richard Bissell would have to leave as soon as the storm died down a bit. And that's exactly what happened. So, other things that Kennedy did, he made a letter out to all the ambassadors from the president, giving them clear authority over all U.S. agencies abroad. That includes the CIA, and that was cleared and sent off on May 29, 1961. Now, Robert McNamara, as Secretary of Defense, he established the Defense Intelligence Agency, which had its own intelligence and even some covert operations involved with it. And that also involved basically consolidating some of the intelligence agencies of the military, Army G2, Air Force's A2, Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence, getting much of this flow from these agencies up into the DIA, which was a part of the Department of Defense. But I just want to drive home to you the point in this book that what is going on is Schlesinger was put in charge with President Kennedy to draw up proposals on what to do with the CIA. Some of them involved changing its name, really pretty much destroying it as we know it today. These proposals were floated to the press. There's absolutely no interest among the public in doing this. There's no congressional support either, and that would require legislation to make all these changes. So therefore, nothing happened, because for Kennedy to try to make the bold changes Schlesinger was proposing would mean doing it all by himself with no public support, no support in Congress, and he would be facing the opposition from forces friendly to the CIA in what you may call the power elite or auxiliaries, allies of the CIA in Washington and the Beltway. So nothing happened that was big. The idea that Kennedy was going to destroy the CIA did not happen. It was derailed. It was something that was thought about as a possibility and not acted on. However, changes were made, and as Roger Hilsman notes, those changes would, because they couldn't be done through Congress, would have to be made within the executive branch itself. And there's a hidden secret battle about those changes that I haven't seen anyone write about except two authors that are very obscure, and no Kennedy researchers has of yet made note of this battle. but I'm going to do it in a follow-up video, and it's going to explain to you who ultimately took control of the Bay of Pigs style covert operations. And it was a process that did not happen within 2 or 3 months, but over 2 or 3 years. And that story is going to be in the next video of the past American century.